The phone rang just after sunset, when the sky above Wilmington was painted in streaks of orange and purple. I was sitting on the old wicker chair on the porch of my beach house, listening to the ocean waves crashing in the distance. That house had been my safe place for decades, my sanctuary after long years of teaching and raising my daughter on my own. The sea had a way of calming me, of whispering to me that no matter how rough life became, it would always return with the tide. But that evening, the calm ended with a single phone call. I picked up the phone, my hands still smelling faintly of lavender soap. The voice on the other end was my daughter's. Marissa. My only child. My pride, my sacrifice, my reason for surviving the hardest years of my life. Except tonight, her voice carried no warmth, no tenderness. It was clipped, almost rehearsed, like a business call rather than a daughter speaking to her mother. Mom, she said. Not mother. Not mama, like she used to call me when she was little. Just mom, flat and hard. We're leaving tomorrow. The beach house has already been sold. Bye. The words sliced through me like a knife. For a moment, I could not even breathe. My hand trembled so much the phone nearly slipped. Sold. She had said the beach house was sold. My beach house. The only thing Daniel and I had managed to buy together before his heart failed him all those years ago. The place where we spent summers building sandcastles with Marissa, where Daniel had taught her to swim, where his ashes were scattered under the big oak tree by the water. That house was not just wood and nails. It was my life. I swallowed, my throat dry as sand. My voice came out in a whisper. But you forgot one thing. There was silence. Then the sharp inhale of irritation on her end. What are you talking about, Mom? I felt the corners of my lips curve upward into a small laugh, though tears filled my eyes. It wasn't a laugh of joy, it was the kind of laugh a woman gives when she knows something her betrayer doesn't. My daughter thought she had one. She thought she could strip me of the only thing I had left in this world. But she had forgotten one very important truth. The house she sold was never hers to sell. I pressed the phone to my ear, my heart beat loud in the silence between us. You'll see, I said quietly. Marissa scoffed. Mom, don't start your games. It's done. I've signed everything. You'll be out tomorrow morning. We'll come pick you up at 9. Before I could answer, the line went dead. She hung up on me. For a long time, I sat there in the gathering darkness, the sound of the ocean filling my ears as my tears slid down my face. The breeze was cool against my skin, but inside, I burned with betrayal. I thought of all the years I spent sacrificing so Marissa could have everything. All the extra hours at school tutoring children after class, the nights I stayed awake sewing her costumes for school plays, the summers the first worked double shifts at the library so she could afford cheerleading camp. I gave her everything. And now she had taken the one place that was truly mine. I am Eleanor Whitfield. 58 years old. A retired schoolteacher. A widow. And, apparently, a fool. When Daniel died, Marissa was only 13. She was lost, angry, bitter at the world. I did everything I could to keep her steady. I sold the little jewelry I had to keep her in private school, thinking it would give her the best chance in life. I worked until my bones ached. I went without new clothes, without vacations, without even fixing the leaking roof in my own house until it nearly collapsed, just so she could feel safe and cared for. And she was cared for. At least, I thought she was. But over the years, something changed. The girl who used to cuddle next to me on the porch, eating popsicles and watching the stars, slowly drifted away. She became colder, sharper. When she married, I thought perhaps she would find happiness. But instead, she found control. Not hers, her husband's. I never trusted Nathan. He had a smile that never reached his eyes, a way of speaking that always made me feel like I was being judged. He married my daughter quickly, swept her off her feet with promises of money and success. But what he really wanted was power. And he found it in her inheritance, in her trust fund, in her willingness to believe everything he told her. I saw it in the way he whispered in her ear during family dinners. The way he convinced her I was old-fashioned, stuck in my ways, incapable of understanding the modern world. Slowly, Marissa began to look at me differently. Not as her mother, but as a burden she had to manage. And tonight, she had gone too far. Selling the beach house was not just cruel, it was impossible. Because Marissa did not know the truth. Years ago, after Daniel died, I changed the will. I placed the deed to this house in a trust under my name only, with strict instructions that it could never be sold without my consent. It was the only way I knew to protect the one place that still carried Daniel's spirit, the place where I felt him beside me when the nights were long and lonely. But I never told Marissa. Part of me wanted her to believe she had control, to test her loyalty. Tonight, she had failed that test spectacularly. The phone was still in my lap, the screen dark. I thought of calling her back, of screaming at her, demanding an explanation. But what good would it do? She would only lie, only twist her words until I was the one who looked crazy. No. I would not give her that satisfaction. Instead, I sat there on the porch, listening to the sea, remembering Daniel's laugh, his warm hand holding mine as we dreamed of the future. I whispered into the night, "She thinks she's taken everything. But she has no idea." The waves seemed to answer me, steady and strong. Tomorrow morning, she and Nathan would come to the beach house, expecting to drag me out like some old woman too weak to fight. They thought they held all the power. But they had underestimated me. Because Eleanor Whitfield may be 58, maybe a widow, maybe a retired teacher with aching knees and silver in her hair. But I am not weak. And tomorrow, when my daughter steps into this house with her husband smirking by her side, they will discover the truth. The house they sold was never theirs. And the secret I have kept hidden for nearly 20 years will change everything. The sun had fully set now, the sky deepening into darkness. I rose from the porch chair, my legs stiff, and walked inside. The house smelled of cedar and salt, the floors creaking under my weight. Every photo on the wall seemed to watch me, memories frozen in time. Daniel holding Marissa on his shoulders at the beach, Marissa's sweet 16 with cake frosting on her nose, my graduation party from teaching after 35 long years. This was not just a house. It was a story, my story. And no one, not even my own daughter, had the right to erase it. I poured myself a glass of water, my reflection staring back at me from the kitchen window. Lines etched deep into my face, but my eyes were steady. I felt tired, yes, but beneath the tiredness there was a fire I had not felt in years. A quiet strength. The kind of strength that builds after decades of surviving heartbreak. I set the glass down and whispered, "Tomorrow they'll see." And in that moment, for the first time in years, I did not feel like the abandoned mother or the unwanted widow. I felt like a woman who was ready. Ready to fight. Ready to remind them who I was. Ready to show my daughter that betrayal has consequences. And as the ocean roared outside, I knew tomorrow would be the beginning of something none of us could ever forget. Because the house she thought she sold was not just a house. It was a weapon. A truth. A key to everything. And when she discovered what she had overlooked, her perfect little world would come crashing down. The night after Marissa's call was long. I barely slept. The ocean kept rolling against the shore, steady and eternal, but inside me everything felt broken, like a fragile vase finally dropped after years of being handled too roughly. I sat up in bed and stared at the ceiling, memories pouring in, flooding me so heavy I could hardly breathe. It was impossible not to ask myself, how did we get here? How did my little girl, the one I held in my arms after Daniel died, become the same woman who could look me in the eye and sell my home behind my back? I closed my eyes, and suddenly I was back in the summer of 1997. Daniel was alive then. His laugh filled every corner of the house, his strong hands always fixing something. Hammering loose boards on the porch, painting shutters that the sea winds had worn down. He was the kind of man people called dependable. Not flashy, not rich, but steady. And steady was all I ever wanted. We bought this beach house together. It wasn't fancy. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with old yellow tiles, a porch with wicker chairs we found at a flea market. But to me, it was a palace. It was where I imagined growing old with him, watching our grandchildren play in the surf. He promised me, one night under the stars, that this would be our forever place. I believed him. And then one morning, he was gone. A heart attack, the doctor said. No warning, no time to prepare. One moment he was laughing, eating blueberry pancakes with Marissa, and the next, I was clutching his still hand in a hospital room, my cries echoing off sterile walls. I was 38 years old, a widow, and a mother to a 13-year-old girl whose entire world had just collapsed. Marissa screamed at me when I told her. She screamed and sobbed and beat her fists against my chest, demanding I bring him back. I held her, even as she blamed me for things I could never change. That was the first time I saw something harden in her eyes. A piece of her innocence died that day, and it never came back. After the funeral, life became about survival. I taught during the day, came home to cook, cleaned the house, and lay awake at night worrying about bills. The pension wasn't enough. I worked extra hours, graded papers until my eyes stung, and still tried to smile when Marissa needed me. She was smart. Too smart sometimes. And she learned quickly how to use her grief like a weapon. She would slam doors, run out with friends I did not approve of, accuse me of being controlling whenever I tried to set rules. More than once, I sat alone in the kitchen, tears dripping into my cup of tea, wondering if she would ever forgive me for not being enough. Still, I loved her. Every time she stormed back through the door, every time I heard her breathing as she slept in her bed, I reminded myself, she is all I have left of Daniel. And I cannot lose her too. The years rolled by. Marissa grew more distant, more restless. By the time she finished high school, she could not get away from me fast enough. College was her escape, and I was proud of her for getting in, even if it meant she only called once a week, then once a month, then only when she needed money. I told myself that was normal, that all kids pull away. But when she brought Nathan home for the first time, I knew something was wrong. He was charming, at least on the surface. Handsome, with that perfect smile that politicians and salesmen have. He shook my hand firmly, complimented my cooking, told me I raised a beautiful daughter. But behind his eyes, I saw calculation. A man who measured people like bank accounts. He never came right out and said it, but I could feel his judgment every time he looked around the house. To him, the chipped paint and second-hand furniture meant failure. He wanted Marissa to have more. To live in the city, wear expensive clothes, drive cars that turned heads. I could not give her that. And so, he whispered promises to her, filling her ears with visions of a life far removed from the one I had built. Within a year, they were married. She was 22, too young, too eager to be swept away. I tried to warn her. I begged her to slow down, to think about what she wanted, not just what Nathan told her. But she accused me of being jealous, of wanting to control her. The day she moved out, I stood on the porch, watching the car pull away, and felt as though I was losing her for good. And in many ways, I did. For years after that, she only came back to the beach house for holidays, and even then, she was never truly present. Always on her phone, always checking her watch, always rushing to leave. Nathan hardly spoke to me. When he did, it was about money, my retirement, what I planned to do with the house. He asked questions that no son-in-law should be asking. It was Daniel's death all over again. Another slow breaking of my heart. I poured everything I had into holding on to what little family I had left. Every Christmas, I bought gifts I could not afford just to see her smile. Every birthday, I cooked her favorite meals even though she hardly ate them. And every time she left, I sat alone in this house, whispering into the night, "Daniel, if you can hear me, please help me." But there was no answer. Only the sea, and my memories. Then, a few years ago, I did something I never told Marissa. Something I knew would one day protect me, even from her. I took the deed to this house and placed it in a trust under my name only. The lawyer looked at me with kind eyes and asked, "Do you want your daughter to know?" I shook my head. No. This was not about hurting her. This was about survival. I could feel even then that the tide was shifting. That one day, she might try to take everything from me. And now, that day had arrived. I sat on the porch that night, staring at the waves, remembering the way Marissa used to laugh when Daniel swung her up onto his shoulders. I remembered her chubby little hands covered in sand, her bright eyes sparkling as she built castles at the edge of the surf. Where had that little girl gone? When did she become a woman who could turn her back on me without a flicker of guilt? The phone lay beside me. I wanted to call her back, to remind her of everything I had done for her. I wanted to scream. Do you remember who stayed awake with you when you were sick? Do you remember who sold her wedding ring to pay for your school trips? Do you remember who gave up every dream she had so you could have yours? But I knew it would not matter. She was too far gone. Instead, I sat there, letting the grief wash over me like the tide. By the time the clock struck midnight, I had made a decision. If she wanted to play this game, then I would not stop her. Tomorrow, she and Nathan would come with their smug faces, expecting me to pack my bags and leave quietly. But they had no idea what awaited them. They had forgotten that I am not just a mother. I am a survivor. I survived Daniel's death. I survived raising a teenager alone with no money. I survived years of loneliness and silence. And I would survive this. More than that, I would not just survive. I would win. As I rose from the porch chair, my knees aching, I glanced back at the old oak tree in the yard, the one where Daniel's ashes lay. I whispered into the night, "Tomorrow, love, I'll remind them whose house this truly is." The waves roared louder, as though answering me. And for the first time in years, I felt Daniel's strength rise inside me. The house was not gone. The fight was only beginning. Morning came with the sound of gulls crying over the surf and sunlight pouring through the thin curtains of my bedroom. I had barely slept, but I felt sharper than I had in years. My body ached, yes, 58 years will do that to you, but my mind was awake, alert, brimming with a quiet strength that had been buried too long. The house was silent except for the ticking of the old clock in the living room. It had belonged to my grandmother, passed down through the years, its steady rhythm marking every second of my life here. I found myself listening to it as though it were reminding me of something. Hold steady, Eleanor. Do not falter. By 9 o'clock, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. My heart thudded once hard. They were here. I walked to the front window and pulled the curtain aside. There they were, Marissa and Nathan, stepping out of their silver SUV as though they owned the ground they walked on. Nathan in his crisp navy blazer, his hair slicked back, his smug expression radiating victory. Marissa trailing behind him, her sunglasses hiding her eyes, her expensive shoes sinking into the sand. She looked thinner than the last time I saw her, her cheekbones sharper, her skin pale, but she still carried herself with that entitled air Nathan had taught her. I stayed at the window for a moment, unseen, studying them. I thought of the little girl who used to run barefoot across this very yard, laughing with Daniel as he chased her. I thought of the nights she curled up in my bed after nightmares, her tiny hands clutching mine. Those memories still lived in me, but when I looked at the woman walking up the porch steps now, it was as though she had buried all those moments deep under layers of coldness. They knocked once, then Nathan opened the door without waiting for me to answer. My stomach turned. This was my home, and he walked in as though it belonged to him. "Morning, Eleanor," Nathan said, his tone slick, his smile practiced. "Beautiful day for moving out." I met him in the living room, standing tall despite the tremor in my knees. "Good morning, Nathan." My voice was steady. "And what makes you think I'm moving out?" Marissa took off her sunglasses, her eyes narrowing. "Mom, don't start. The papers are signed. The new owners will be here in a few days. We came to help you pack." I studied her face. For a fleeting second, I thought I saw hesitation there, a flicker of something human. But then she crossed her arms, tilting her head the way she used to when she was a teenager about to defy me. I walked slowly to the kitchen table, my slippers whispering against the wooden floor. On the table sat a stack of old photo albums I had pulled out the night before. Daniel's smile beamed from the covers, Marissa's childhood frozen in snapshots. I rested my hand on them, steadying myself. "You think you sold this house," I said quietly. "But you didn't." Nathan laughed. It wasn't loud, but it was full of contempt. "Oh, Eleanor. The denial is understandable. Change is hard, I get it. But I've handled everything. It's done." I lifted my eyes to his. "No, Nathan. You handled nothing." Marissa groaned. "Mom, please. Don't make this harder. You can't stop what's already done." I felt a laugh rise in my chest, soft but cutting. "Marissa, do you remember when you were 15, and you begged me not to sell your father's old truck? You said it was all you had left of him." She frowned, caught off guard. What does that have to do with anything? I took a step closer. Do you think I would ever sell the only thing I had left of him? Do you think I would leave his ashes buried under the oak tree out back just to make some quick money? For the first time, I saw her falter. She glanced toward the yard, toward the tree, then quickly looked away. Nathan waved a dismissive hand. Romantic nonsense. The buyers don't care about ashes in the yard. Sentimental attachments don't stop property sales. I let his arrogance hang in the air for a moment. Then I smiled. No. But legal trusts do. The color drained from his face just slightly, though he tried to recover. What are you talking about? I straightened my back. This house was placed in a private trust years ago. It cannot be sold, not by you, not by Marissa, not by anyone but me. And I didn't sell it. The silence that followed was almost sweet. Nathan's jaw tightened. He glanced at Marissa, but she looked genuinely confused. What? Mom, that's not true. I signed the sale papers myself. You signed papers that mean nothing, I said. Papers that are worth less than the pen you used to sign them. Because you never had the authority. You never even bothered to ask. You assumed. Marissa's face went pale. She turned to Nathan, her voice trembling. You told me it was done. You told me everything was legal. Nathan's mask cracked for the first time. It should have been. He stopped, grinding his teeth. Then he glared at me, venom in his eyes. You think this makes you smart, Eleanor? You think this makes you untouchable? All it does is prove you've been hiding things from your daughter. I walked back to the porch door, pulling it open so the sound of the waves filled the house. I wasn't hiding. I was protecting. Protecting Daniel's memory. Protecting the only home we ever built together. And protecting myself, from the day you both might try to do exactly what you did. Marissa's lip trembled, but she pressed her arms tighter across her chest. Why didn't you tell me? Because, I said, meeting her eyes, I wanted to believe you would never betray me. But I was wrong. The room fell into silence. Outside, the gulls cried again, as though mocking the moment. Nathan broke first, his voice hard. We'll contest it. We'll go to court. We'll make sure you lose everything. I tilted my head, my smile calm. Do that. And I'll show the judge the paperwork. The trust is airtight. You'll lose, Nathan. Not me. For a moment, his facade crumbled. His face darkened, his fists clenched. He hated losing. Men like him always did. Marissa turned away, her shoulders shaking. I could not tell if it was from anger or shame. Maybe both. I let them sit in that silence, their victory slipping away like sand through their fingers. And then I said the words I knew would stay with them forever. You thought you could erase me from this house. But what you really did was erase my trust in you, Marissa. And that is something you can never buy back. Her eyes snapped to mine, wet and furious. For a second, I thought she might crumble, fall into my arms the way she used to when she was little. But she didn't. She turned her face, hiding the tears before Nathan could see them. He touched her arm, guiding her toward the door. Let's go, he muttered. They left without another word, the slam of the SUV door echoing in the morning air. I stood on the porch, watching them drive away, the wind whipping through my hair. My knees were weak, my heart heavy, but I felt taller than I had in years. For the first time in a long while, I was not the helpless widow, not the discarded mother. I was the woman who held the power. I looked out at the ocean, my hands trembling with the weight of everything that had just happened. This battle was not over. I knew Nathan well enough to know he would not let it go. But for now, the house was mine. And as the SUV disappeared down the road, I whispered to Daniel's memory, we kept it, love. We kept it safe. But deep down, I also knew this confrontation was only the beginning. Because when people like Nathan lose, they don't walk away quietly. They fight back. And next time, I feared, the war would not just be about the house. The day after the confrontation, the beach house felt different. Quieter, heavier, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. I walked from room to room, touching the furniture, the photographs, the worn quilt Daniel's mother had made for us. The air still smelled faintly of salt and old cedar, but beneath it, I could almost sense their anger lingering like smoke after a fire. I knew Nathan would not let this go. Men like him never did. He wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. Losing meant weakness, and weakness was something he despised. He would fight back, not because he needed the house, but because he needed to prove he could control me. And that scared me more than I wanted to admit. I made a pot of coffee, my hands trembling slightly as I poured it into my favorite mug. Daniel's old navy mug. The handle was chipped, but I kept it anyway, because it felt like holding a piece of him every morning. I sat at the kitchen table and sipped slowly, trying to think. Nathan had money, connections. And he had Marissa, who had always been quick to believe him over me. I had none of those things. But what I did have was truth. The trust documents were airtight, filed legally, protected by the state. He couldn't touch the house. At least, not legally. But there were other ways. I glanced at the phone on the counter, half expecting it to ring. It didn't. Not that morning, not that afternoon. For 2 days, silence stretched between us. I almost let myself believe they had given up, that perhaps Nathan had convinced Marissa to let it go and focus on their own lives. But on the 3rd day, the war began. I was in town, buying groceries at the small market near the pier. People in Wilmington know each other. It's a small community, where whispers spread faster than the tide. As I walked down the aisles, I noticed people staring. Not the usual polite nods or friendly smiles, but curious, judgmental glances. A few even whispered behind their hands. At the checkout counter, the cashier, an older woman named Ruth, gave me a look I had never seen from her before. Pity. Rough week, Eleanor? She asked gently. I frowned. Why do you ask? She hesitated, then lowered her voice. I heard about the house. Folks are saying Marissa had to sell it because you've been slipping. Forgetting things. Not able to take care of yourself anymore. The words hit me like a punch. What? She winced. I didn't mean to upset you. But that's what people are saying. That maybe it's time you moved into assisted living for your safety. I stood there frozen, my hands gripping the edge of the counter. Slipping. Forgetting things. Assisted living. Nathan. Of course. I forced a smile, paid for my groceries, and left without another word. But inside, fury burned hot. He was trying to rewrite the story. Trying to turn me into the villain, the crazy old woman clinging to something she no longer deserved. And in a town like this, reputation meant everything. By the time I drove back to the beach house, I was shaking with rage. I slammed the groceries down on the counter and paced the kitchen, muttering to myself. He wanted to break me down piece by piece. First by taking my house. Now by taking my dignity. If enough people believed his lies, then even the trust might not save me. Judges were human too, influenced by whispers. If Nathan painted me as unstable, unfit, incapable of managing my own affairs, he could go after guardianship. And with Marissa's signature, he could try again to seize control. I sat at the table, my head in my hands. For a moment, the weight of it all felt unbearable. I was just one woman. One aging widow with no money, no allies, and a daughter who no longer believed in me. What chance did I have against a man like Nathan? Then I looked up. On the wall across from me hung a photo of Daniel, taken the summer before he died. He was smiling, his arm around Marissa, the sun glowing on their faces. His eyes seemed to meet mine, steady and kind. And I remembered something he used to tell me whenever life felt too heavy. Steady, Eleanor. The tide always turns. The tide always turns. I straightened my back. I would not let Nathan destroy me. If he wanted a war, then he would get one. But mine would not be loud or reckless. Mine would be quiet, patient. The kind of war built on truth and resilience. That evening, I began to prepare. The first thing I did was call my lawyer, Mr. Hanley, the same kind man who had helped me set up the trust years ago. His voice was calm, reassuring, as I explained everything that had happened. Eleanor, he said firmly, you did the right thing back then. The trust is solid. Nathan cannot touch the property without your consent. Do not be afraid. But he's spreading lies, I said. He's telling people I'm losing my mind. Mr. Hanley sighed. Unfortunately, people will talk. But as long as you are capable, and I know you are, those lies have no legal power. Still, document everything. Keep a record of what he says and does. If he tries anything, we'll be ready. I thanked him, my heart steadier. It wasn't much, but it was something. A plan. The next morning, I began writing everything down in a journal. Every phone call. Every encounter. Every whisper I heard in town. If Nathan wanted to play dirty, I would not stoop to his level, but I would be ready to show the truth. Days passed. Sometimes the phone would ring, but when I answered, there was only silence. Other times, I would find strange cars idling near the beach house, their windows tinted. I could feel his presence, like a shadow pressing against the walls of my sanctuary. And Marissa? She was silent. No calls, no visits. I did not know if she was ashamed, or if Nathan had convinced her to stay away. That silence hurt more than anything. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the ocean in gold, I sat on the porch and thought about her. I thought about the girl she had been, the woman she had become, and the war Nathan had dragged her into. And for the first time, I asked myself a question I had been avoiding. Was Marissa truly blind? Or was she choosing not to see? The thought gnawed at me. Because if she was choosing, then she was not just a victim of Nathan's manipulation. She was part of the betrayal. The following week proved my fears right. I was in town again, this time at the pharmacy picking up my blood pressure medication, when I heard two women whispering by the magazines. That's her, right? Eleanor Whitfield. Poor thing. Her daughter says she forgets to take her pills half the time. I froze. My fingers tightened around the little white bag in my hand. Marissa. It had to be Marissa. Nathan might start the lies, but he needed her voice to make them believable. I turned slowly, my chest aching. For a moment, I thought I would collapse right there in the aisle. My daughter was helping him. That night, back at the beach house, I sat on the porch with tears streaming down my face. I whispered into the darkness, "Why, Marissa? Why would you do this to me?" The ocean gave no answer. But then, slowly, my tears dried. I wiped my face and sat straighter. If Marissa had chosen Nathan's side, then I had to accept it. It broke my heart, but it also freed me. I could no longer hope she would rescue me. I could no longer wait for her to remember who I was. It was just me now. Me and the truth. And that truth would be my weapon. As the waves rolled in, steady and strong, I made myself a promise. Nathan thought he could break me with lies. Marissa thought she could erase me with silence. But they had both forgotten something. I am Eleanor Whitfield. I am not weak. And this war has only just begun. The letter arrived on a Wednesday morning, tucked neatly into my mailbox like an ordinary piece of mail. But the moment I saw the heavy cream envelope, embossed with a law firm's name in dark ink, my stomach sank. I didn't even need to open it to know who was behind it. I carried it into the kitchen with trembling hands. The seal broke too easily, the flap tearing like thin skin. I pulled out the crisp papers, the ink still smelling fresh, and read the first lines. Notice of petition for guardianship. I sat down hard in the kitchen chair, the letter shaking between my fingers. Guardianship. My worst fear. Nathan was moving to have me declared legally incompetent, unable to make decisions for myself. If he succeeded, the court could hand him control over my finances, my property. Everything. And the beach house? He would finally get what he wanted. I read through the papers, each sentence cutting deeper than the last. Attached were affidavits. Statements. Testimonies. Marissa's name was there, alongside Nathan's. They claimed I was forgetful, reckless, endangering myself by living alone. They said I often skipped medication, left the stove on, even wandered the beach late at night as though lost. Lies, all of them, but written in neat paragraphs with their signatures at the bottom. For a long time, I couldn't breathe. My own daughter. The walls of the kitchen seemed to close in on me, the weight of betrayal pressing on my chest. I wanted to scream, to tear the papers apart, to run down the beach until the wind carried me away. But instead I sat there, silent, staring. Finally, I reached for Daniel's mug on the counter. I held it tightly, grounding myself in its chipped porcelain. Daniel would have known what to do. He would have told me not to give up, not to let fear paralyze me. So I forced myself to breathe. Then I picked up the phone and called Mr. Hanley. He answered on the second ring. "Eleanor, what's wrong?" I read him the first lines of the petition, my voice shaking. He swore softly. "I was afraid of this. Nathan is ruthless. But don't panic, Eleanor. This doesn't mean he's won. It just means he's trying to scare you. You'll have a chance to respond in court." "But Marissa signed it," I whispered. "My own daughter." There was a pause. Then his voice softened. "I know that hurts more than anything. But remember, this isn't about love anymore. It's about control. Nathan has poisoned her against you. We'll fight this." He promised to file a response immediately. He told me to gather anything that proved I was capable. Medical records, prescriptions, even testimony from neighbors who saw me living normally. I nodded, writing everything down on a yellow pad even as tears blurred the ink. After we hung up, I sat for a long time in silence. The house creaked gently around me, the sound of the waves drifting in through the open window. For the first time, the beach house didn't feel like a sanctuary. It felt like a target. That evening, as the sun bled into the ocean, I walked barefoot along the sand. My feet sank into the cool wet earth, the tide lapping gently at my ankles. I thought of all the years I had spent here. Summers with Marissa as a little girl, her laughter echoing across the dunes. Winters with Daniel, wrapped in blankets by the fire, listening to the storm crash outside. This house wasn't just wood and brick. It was memory. It was love. And Nathan wanted to turn it into a trophy. By the time I returned inside, my fear had hardened into something else. Anger. Cold, sharp, steady anger. If Nathan wanted a war in court, then I would fight him there. But I also knew I couldn't just defend myself. Defense wasn't enough. I needed a strategy of my own. Something that would not only protect me, but expose him for what he truly was. The next morning, I drove into town. I started small, conversations with people I trusted. Ruth at the market. Mr. Callahan at the post office. I asked if they would be willing to speak on my behalf, to say they had seen me living normally, managing my life. Both agreed without hesitation. Ruth even teared up, hugging me tightly. "You're not crazy, Eleanor," she said firmly. "We all know it. And if they try to say otherwise, I'll stand in front of the judge myself." Her words gave me strength. But strength wasn't enough. Nathan was clever. He knew how to twist stories, how to charm strangers into believing him. If I wanted to win, I needed more than character witnesses. I needed proof. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my yellow pad, scribbling ideas. A camera, maybe. Something to record him if he came near the house. A journal, to document every interaction. Medical checkups, showing I was healthy and alert. Slowly, a plan began to form. But even as I worked, loneliness gnawed at me. Because no matter how strong I tried to be, part of me still longed for Marissa. I kept replaying her voice in my mind, the way she had said goodbye on the phone, so cold and final. I tried to imagine her signing those papers, her hand steady as she declared her own mother unfit. Why? The question haunted me. The following week, the first court date was set. I walked into the courthouse in Wilmington with my head high, but inside, my heart was pounding. Mr. Hanley walked beside me, his briefcase heavy with documents. The marble hallways echoed with footsteps, every sound magnified, every whisper sharp. When we entered the courtroom, my breath caught. Nathan was already there, wearing a perfectly tailored suit, his hair slicked back. He looked confident, smug. And beside him, Marissa. She wouldn't meet my eyes. For a moment, I thought I might collapse. But then I remembered Daniel's words, "Steady, Eleanor. The tide always turns." I straightened my back and walked to my seat. The hearing was brief, just a preliminary session. Nathan's lawyer spoke first, painting a picture of me as a frail, confused old woman living in dangerous isolation. He used words like deterioration and delusion, each one slicing through me like glass. Then Mr. Hanley stood, his voice calm but firm. He countered every accusation, pointing to the trust, the medical records we had gathered, the affidavits from neighbors. He reminded the judge that I had lived independently for years without issue. The judge listened, his expression unreadable. Finally, he set a date for the full hearing and dismissed us. As we left the courtroom, I finally locked eyes with Marissa. For just a second, something flickered there. Uncertainty. Regret. But then Nathan placed his hand on her arm, and the look vanished. She turned away. I walked out into the bright afternoon sun, my heart heavy. The war was far from over. That evening, back at the beach house, I poured myself a glass of iced tea and sat on the porch, staring at the horizon. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, steady and relentless. I thought about everything I had lost, everything I still stood to lose. But then I thought of something else. Nathan had underestimated me. He thought I was weak, fragile, easy to manipulate. He thought spreading lies would break me, that court papers would scare me into surrender. But he had forgotten who I was. I had spent decades raising a child, holding a marriage together, surviving the loss of the man I loved. I had endured grief, loneliness and betrayal, and still I stood. This house was mine. My memories were mine. My life was mine. And I would fight for them all. The night after the first hearing, I barely slept. I lay in bed, listening to the ocean crash against the shore, my thoughts racing like the tide in a storm. Nathan's face haunted me, smug and confident, as if the outcome was already written in his favor. And Marissa. Oh, Marissa. My daughter's silence cut sharper than any blade. By dawn, I knew one thing for certain. If I kept playing defense, I would lose. Nathan had money, lawyers, influence, and Marissa's testimony. I had only my truth. But truth alone wasn't enough unless I could shine a light on his lies. I needed to expose him. Not just in court, but in the eyes of everyone. The idea began to take shape over coffee at the kitchen table, my yellow pad open in front of me. What did Nathan care about most? Control, yes, but beneath that, it was reputation. He thrived on appearances, on being seen as the successful, dependable husband and provider. If I could crack that image, even a little, everything else might unravel. I started writing names. People who might know things about him. Former business partners. Old neighbors. Anyone. My mind wandered back to something Marissa had once mentioned years ago, during one of her rare visits. Nathan had a bad investment in his past, something about a partner who accused him of theft. She had brushed it off, insisting it was just bitterness. But now, it felt like a thread worth pulling. That afternoon, I drove to the county library, the smell of old paper and dust comforting as I walked among the stacks. I asked the reference librarian, a kind man with thick glasses, about local court records. Within an hour, I was hunched over a microfilm machine, scrolling through years of legal notices and filings. And then I found it. Nathaniel Price versus Daniel Clark. The year was 2012. A lawsuit involving fraud, breach of contract, misappropriation of funds. The details were complicated, but the gist was clear. Nathan had taken money from a small real estate development, promising returns that never materialized. The partner had sued him, but the case was quietly settled out of court. No admission of guilt, no headlines. But it was there, buried in the records for anyone patient enough to find it. I sat back in the stiff chair, my heart pounding. This was it. Proof of the man behind the mask. I printed everything I could, stuffing the papers into a manila folder. As I walked out of the library, the sun hit my face, warm and bright. For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. But I also knew I had to be careful. Nathan would not hesitate to destroy me if he knew I was digging into his past. That night, I hid the folder under the loose floorboard in my bedroom, the same place where Daniel had once hidden love letters to me before we were married. It felt almost poetic, hiding secrets in the same spot where love had once lived. The next day, As if sensing my new resolve, Nathan struck again. I was in the market picking up bread when I overheard two men by the deli counter. "Did you hear about Eleanor Whitfield?" one said. "Her daughter says she's not safe alone anymore. Poor woman, doesn't even know what day it is." I gripped the shopping basket so hard my knuckles turned white. The lies were spreading faster now, woven into every corner of the town. Nathan was tightening the net, making sure that by the time we returned to court, the community already saw me as unstable. When I returned home, I found a card tucked under my door. No name, just a typed message. "Sell now before it's too late." I stood there staring at it, my hands trembling. It wasn't just about the court anymore. Nathan was trying to frighten me, to drive me out by any means necessary. I tore the card in half and threw it in the trash. That night, I sat on the porch, staring out at the dark horizon. The ocean roared, endless and unyielding. I whispered into the night, "You picked the wrong woman, Nathan." The following morning, I made another decision. I couldn't fight this war alone anymore. I needed allies. I drove to see Ruth at the market, who had always been kind to me. Over coffee in her cozy kitchen, I showed her the court papers and explained everything. Her eyes widened with outrage. "That man is a snake," she said firmly. "And if he thinks he can scare you out of your own home, he's got another thing coming." She promised to gather others in town who knew me well, people willing to testify on my behalf. "We'll make sure the judge sees the truth," she said, her hand warm on mine. Her support gave me strength, but I knew I needed more. Proof of Nathan's character, something undeniable. The following week, I tracked down Daniel Clark, the man Nathan had once wronged. It wasn't easy. He had moved to a neighboring county, but with enough phone calls and persistence, I finally reached him. When I explained who I was and why I was calling, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then he sighed. "I always knew Nathan's past would catch up to him," he said quietly. "He ruined me, you know. Took everything I had. I tried to fight, but he bought his way out." I swallowed hard. "Would you be willing to tell your story?" Another pause. Then, softly, "For you?" "Yes. Because men like him shouldn't keep winning." When I hung up, I felt tears sting my eyes. I wasn't alone anymore. Slowly, piece by piece, I was building a wall of truth around myself. But Nathan wasn't blind. He must have sensed something, because the very next day, he showed up at the beach house. I heard the crunch of tires on gravel and looked out the window to see his sleek black car pulling into the driveway. My heart jumped, but I forced myself to stay calm as I opened the door. He stood there, perfectly polished as always, his smile sharp as a blade. "Eleanor," he said smoothly. "May I come in?" "No," I said flatly. His smile tightened, but he didn't push. Instead, he slipped his hands into his pockets and looked past me at the house. "You know, this place is wasted on you. All these years, and it's still the same. Dusty. Stuck in time. Wouldn't it be better to let it go? Let it become something new?" My hands curled into fists at my sides. "This house isn't yours to take." His eyes gleamed. "Not yet." For a moment, we stood there, the air thick with tension. Then he leaned closer, his voice low. "You can fight me, Eleanor. But you'll lose. And when you do, no one will remember you as the strong woman you think you are. They'll remember you as the old woman who couldn't let go." I smiled then. A small, quiet smile. "You've forgotten something, Nathan." He frowned. "What's that?" "I've been underestimated my whole life. And every time, it was their mistake." His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He turned, walked back to his car, and drove away, the sound of his tires spitting gravel into the air. I stood on the porch long after he was gone, my heart racing. He thought he was winning. He thought his lies were enough. But soon, the truth would come to light. I went inside, lifted the floorboard in my bedroom, and touched the manila folder hidden there. The tide was turning. Slowly, steadily, it was turning. And Nathan Price was about to find out what happens when you push a woman who has nothing left to lose. The morning of the full guardianship hearing dawned gray and heavy, as if the sky itself knew what was coming. I woke before the sun, the sound of waves thundering outside like a warning drumbeat. I dressed carefully, navy skirt, cream blouse, Daniel's silver locket resting against my chest. I wanted to look steady, composed, unshakable. Because today, every glance, every word, every movement would be weighed against me. Mr. Hanley met me outside the courthouse, his expression solemn. "Stay calm, Eleanor. Remember, the judge will be watching how you carry yourself. Let Nathan expose his own arrogance." I nodded, clutching my handbag where the manila folder was tucked safely inside. Proof of Nathan's fraud, waiting for the right moment. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with low voices. People from town had come, curious to see the spectacle. Ruth sat near the back, her arms folded tightly, her eyes shining with support. I drew strength from her presence. And then I saw them. Nathan and Marissa, sitting side by side at the petitioner's table. He looked immaculate, his suit flawless, his hair gleaming. Marissa, though, looked tired. Her eyes had dark circles beneath them, and her hands fidgeted in her lap. For a moment, our eyes met. My heart squeezed. But she quickly looked away. The bailiff called the room to order, and the judge entered. He was a stern man with silver hair, his gaze sharp as he surveyed the room. "We are here today to consider the petition of guardianship filed by Nathaniel Price and Marissa Price against Eleanor Whitfield," he began. His voice echoed like a gavel itself. Nathan's lawyer spoke first. A tall man with a smooth voice, he painted a portrait of me as a woman slipping into confusion, unable to care for herself. He listed fabricated incidents: me leaving the stove on, wandering the beach at midnight, missing doses of medication. Each lie tightened the knot in my chest, but I kept my face calm, my hands steady in my lap. Then Nathan himself took the stand. He spoke with practiced sincerity, his voice dripping with false concern. "We love Eleanor," he said, glancing at Marissa for effect. "That's why we're here. We don't want her to get hurt. She forgets things. She refuses help. She's vulnerable, living alone in that old house. It's not safe." I could almost see the jury of onlookers nodding, whispering, swallowing his performance. He was good. Too good. When it was Marissa's turn, my heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear. She walked slowly to the witness chair, her hands trembling as she took the oath. The lawyer guided her gently. "Marissa, can you tell us what you've observed about your mother's condition?" Her voice cracked. She forgets things sometimes. She gets stubborn. She paused, biting her lip. "I just worry about her." It wasn't the damning testimony Nathan wanted, but it still cut deep. My own daughter, doubting me in front of strangers. When my turn came, I rose slowly, every eye in the courtroom on me. Mr. Hanley guided me to the stand. "Mrs. Whitfield," he began, his voice calm. "How would you describe your daily life?" I lifted my chin. "I wake up early. I cook my meals. I manage my medications. I pay my bills on time. I garden. I walk the beach for exercise. I take care of myself, and I take care of my home." He nodded. "And have you ever forgotten to take medication?" "No," I said firmly. "I keep a pill organizer by my bed. Every dose is accounted for." He handed me a stack of receipts and medical records. "Your doctor confirms this?" "Yes." He let me speak, let me show the judge that my mind was clear, my words steady. But even as I spoke, I could feel Nathan's eyes burning into me, daring me to stumble. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. "Mrs. Whitfield," Mr. Hanley said, "are you aware of Nathan Price's past business dealings?" Nathan's lawyer jumped up immediately. Objection irrelevant. But Mr. Hanley was ready. "Your Honor, this goes to the petitioner's credibility. If he is claiming to act in her best interest, the court has a right to know his history." The judge considered, then nodded. "I'll allow it. Proceed." I reached into my handbag and pulled out the manila folder. My hands didn't shake as I held it. "These are court records from 2012, I said clearly. "Nathan Price was sued for fraud and misappropriation of funds by his former business partner. The case was settled quietly, but the accusations were serious. He took money and betrayed trust, just as he is trying to do now. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Nathan's face flushed, his confident mask cracking for the first time. His lawyer sputtered. "Your Honor, this is ancient history." But the judge held up a hand. "I will review the documents." He looked directly at Nathan. "If these records are accurate, they raise serious questions about your intentions here." For the first time, Nathan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I looked at Marissa then. Her eyes were wide, her face pale. She looked at me, then at Nathan, then back again. Something in her expression shifted, like a veil being lifted, even if only for a moment. Mr. Hanley closed our case with quiet strength. He reminded the court of my independence, of the lies Nathan had spread, of the community members willing to testify on my behalf. "This is not about Eleanor's well-being," he said firmly. "This is about control. Nathan Price wants what does not belong to him, and he has convinced Marissa to help him take it." The judge dismissed us for the day, saying he would consider the evidence carefully. As the courtroom emptied, Nathan leaned close to Marissa, whispering harshly. She looked shaken, caught between him and me. For the first time, I saw doubt in her eyes. Outside, Ruth rushed to hug me. "You were magnificent," she whispered. "Everyone saw through him today. Everyone." But as I stood there on the courthouse steps, the sun breaking through the clouds above, I knew it wasn't over. Nathan wouldn't stop just because he'd been exposed. If anything, he would strike harder, more desperately. The war was reaching its peak. And the final battle was still to come. The morning of the judge's decision felt strangely calm. The storm had passed during the night, leaving the beach washed clean, the air fresh with the scent of salt and rain. I stood on the porch with a cup of coffee in my hand, watching the waves roll in. For the first time in weeks, my heart wasn't racing. Instead, it was steady, almost at peace. I knew today would decide everything. My future. My freedom. My home. At the courthouse, the atmosphere was tense. People from town had come again, filling the benches, their whispers echoing off the walls. Ruth waved at me from the back row, her face full of encouragement. I nodded, drawing strength from her presence. Nathan sat at the petitioner's table, his jaw tight, his eyes cold. He looked less polished today, as if the cracks in his armor were beginning to show. Beside him, Marissa sat stiffly, her hands clasped in her lap. She avoided my gaze. The judge entered, his expression unreadable as he shuffled the papers before him. He began by summarizing the case, the petition for guardianship, the testimony given, the evidence submitted. His voice was calm, measured, but each word felt like a drumbeat. Then he looked up, his gaze sweeping the room. "This case is not simply about whether Eleanor Whitfield can care for herself," he said. "It is about motive. About whether those petitioning for guardianship are acting in her best interest, or in their own." Nathan's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. The judge continued. "The evidence presented raises troubling questions about Mr. Price's past business dealings, as well as his credibility. In contrast, Mrs. Whitfield has shown herself to be organized, lucid, and capable of managing her affairs. Her doctor's testimony, her neighbor's support, and her own words make it clear she does not require guardianship." My heart began to pound. "Therefore," the judge said firmly, "the petition is denied." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. I felt my breath leave me in a rush, tears stinging my eyes. I had won. But the judge wasn't finished. He turned his gaze directly on Nathan. "Furthermore, I find the actions of Mr. Price to be manipulative and potentially exploitative. While no charges are before me today, I strongly recommend this matter be referred to the state's Elder Protection Services for review." The color drained from Nathan's face. For once, his mask of confidence was gone, replaced by shock and fury. The gavel struck. "Court is adjourned." The room erupted into whispers. I stood slowly, my legs trembling, my heart soaring. Ruth rushed forward to hug me, her arms warm and steady. "You did it," she whispered. "You beat him." But even as relief washed over me, I looked toward Marissa. She stood frozen, staring at the judge, at Nathan, at me. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with something that looked like shame. Nathan grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the door, but she resisted. For the first time, she pulled away from him. "Don't touch me," she whispered. He glared at her, but she didn't move. Instead, she turned and looked at me. I waited, my heart aching, my breath caught in my chest. Finally, she walked toward me. Her steps were slow, uncertain, but deliberate. When she reached me, her voice was quiet, trembling. "Mom, I'm sorry." Tears welled in my eyes. For a moment, I couldn't speak. All the hurt, the betrayal, the sleepless nights, it all flooded through me. I wanted to scream at her, to ask how she could have chosen him over me. But when I looked into her eyes, I saw the girl she had once been. My little girl, lost and afraid. I reached out and took her hand. "It's not too late," I whispered. She broke down then, sobbing into my shoulder, her body shaking. "I thought I was doing the right thing. He convinced me. He made me believe you couldn't handle it. I didn't want to lose you. I thought I was protecting you." I held her tightly, my tears mingling with hers. "You almost did lose me," I said softly. "But you can make it right now. Start by choosing the truth." When we pulled apart, Nathan was watching us, his face twisted with rage. He turned on his heel and stormed out of the courtroom, his footsteps echoing like thunder. For the first time, I felt the storm break. Later that evening, back at the beach house, Marissa sat with me on the porch. The sun dipped low, painting the ocean in shades of gold and crimson. We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of everything between us pressing heavy. Finally, she spoke. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." I looked at her, my heart aching but steady. Forgiveness isn't about deserving. It's about healing. For both of us. She wiped her eyes, nodding. "I don't know if I can fix what I've done. But I want to try." I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "Then that's enough." We sat there until the stars came out, the sound of the waves steady and soothing. For the first time in months, I felt peace. But there was one more step I needed to take. The next morning, I opened the loose floorboard in my bedroom and pulled out the manila folder. I drove to the Elder Protection Services office in town and handed it over, along with my written account of everything Nathan had done. The woman behind the desk promised they would investigate thoroughly. As I walked out of the office, the sun warmed my face. I knew it might take time, but Nathan's lies would finally catch up to him. The tide had turned. Back at the beach house, I stood on the porch, looking out at the ocean. This home had been tested, just as I had. But we had both endured. Stronger now. Steadier. I thought of Daniel, his steady voice in my memory. "The tide always turns, Eleanor." And it had. I smiled, lifting my face to the wind. The beach house was safe. My dignity was intact. My daughter was coming back to me. Nathan had tried to break me. But in the end, it was his mask that shattered. And I, Eleanor Whitfield, 61 years old, widow, mother, survivor, had won. Not with bitterness. Not with vengeance. But with truth, patience, and strength. The tide had turned. And I was still standing. My love. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story.